Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck tech video. Today I'm going to go over my recent Bruna Light of Alabaster deck. This is actually my very first Azorius white-blue deck. I have gone through recently a list of all commanders I have ever played, and I realized that I just have never made this color combination. I had started a Rasputin list a while ago and collected cards, but never got around to actually making it. So I decided to pop that cherry, and Bruna was my choice. So I did a lot of research trying to find the best ways to play Bruna and the ways that would be compatible with how I play. And I actually found there's a lot of controversy. A lot of people define the strongest plays of Bruna being either mass enchantments and milling yourself, and then controlling and staxing. And I have an opinion, and I will voice my opinion at the end of the video. So at that point, let's go through the deck. Bruna, this is Bruna before Emrakul and Nahiri, they had their way with her. She is a 6 mana, 3 white blue for a 5/5 flying vigilant angel. She has an ability that triggers 2 different types or states in the game. If she were to be declared as an attacker, or if she were to block a creature, I can pull all auras I want, as in I don't have to take them if I don't want them, from my graveyard, my hand, or anywhere on the battlefield, and just attach them to her. It's a mana cheat. Essentially, it's a way of cheating spells and mana cost off of like an aura into play on her. And that's kind of broken. It depends on how you build the deck, and you can make some very interesting takes on this. My take is more of a control-ish route. I have approximately 10 auras in the deck. Half of them aren't even relevant for Bruna. They're just there to be supportive. Now, I do play the traditional EDH format multiplayer ways with about 3 opponents. And my experience thus far with the 2-3 weeks I've been playing this is that Bruna stays in the command zone until I'm ready. Because I've built my deck in a way that I'm more disruptive and using my auras early, and then I don't really sometimes actually need Bruna. Let's stick her over here. I also have the Gigantor one that's been sitting in a box forever, and I've finally found a use for it. Kind of the reason I broke down to play it. So as I said, my deck, my take on a Bruna is more of a control-ish, semi-staxious, not entirely stacks, but just more of a nuisance, annoying route. We have a Gilded Drake for obvious reasons. It's blue, and this is a great early effect to take the opponent's threats and bait out removal. One of the hardest things about this commander and relying on Bruna is she's a 6-drop, so you need to eat up all your opponent's removal. We have a Grand Abolisher. This is a great thing to have out if you're afraid your opponents are going to do stuff on your turn. It's anti-control, anti-counter, and he tends to eat removal. Same thing on Thalia. I love Thalia. This and the original first strike on this one and non-basic tax is great. The original would be in here if I were more creature-based, I guess. I don't know. I just like this one. I like them both. Even Mind Sensor is a great flash trick when the opponents go to crack a fetch land, or they even just try to tooth and nail. You get this guy in play. They have a Linvala for the random hate, and a Grand Arbiter. Augie here can actually drop Bruna down to being a 4-drop. A 4-drop 5/5 commander. So this deck has, as I said, 10 auras. It actually has 10 mana rocks, an equal amount of mana rocks to aura threats. So Grand Augie here, he can easily come into play on turn 3. Which means I could then get Bruna out on turn 4. And that stacks is usually a pretty annoying effect. We have a few aura effects here. Now what I like to do with this deck, since she can pull auras from the graveyard back, is to just whimsically throw out the auras on whatever creatures I already have. So I will use Heliod's Pilgrim, Aura Touched Mage, and Boonweaver Giant to literally grab the auras out of my deck and put them into play on these guys. I mean, I don't really care if they die because the auras are going to my graveyard and Bruna can recur them. I mean, that can also typically win me the game because obviously I have the Eldrazi conscriptions in here, so getting like that on one of these guys super early is sometimes hard to deal with. We do have other ways of continuing through. We don't have green to ramp us, and we don't have a lot of card space to dedicate since we are limited on our control, our draw. There's a lot of parts to make Bruna work, so we have to make some awkward inclusions, like this guy. We have the mana ramp because, again, a 6-drop commander is hard to get out if we don't have the mana. So these two are in here. These are definitely not competitive. If this were a 1v1 deck, they would 100% not be in here. Half the cards you've seen already would not be in here. But we have a Maul Drifter. This could be a 3-drop a divination, or it could be some flying threat we can put an aura on to bait removal. Karmic God is a generic filler. It's just a nice 2/2 pro black, something fun to put removal or auras on. We have a Cataclysmic Gearhulk. The way this deck tends to play is I'll dick around with some small creature and aura, it'll get blown up, and then I can cast this to screw up the opponent's side. We have a Sun Titan. I have a fair amount of small utility enchantments, a bunch of 2 fetch lands, and the draw in this deck does tend to make us discard as well. The Frantic Search variants, for example. So you can always get lands. We have a Consecrated Sphinx. Again, this is some way of baiting removal that would most likely be targeted at Bruna instead. Something that we can throw enchantments on to really grab that wrath effect. And finally, the Emeria Shepherd. Again, this is, even from her mana cost, you would think blue being the predominant color, it's white blue, not blue white. There's more plains in here than islands, and that's fantastic because I may be discarding auras. I can play lanes to put a Eldrazi Conscripts from my graveyard into play on this. That's a landfall trigger. That's fantastic. Now let's go to the spells. I will show my 100% favorite spell in the entire deck right now. It is Scout's Warning. I don't play a lot of green and white. Like, when I play green, it's usually something with Glimpse of Nature or whatever, and when I play white, or Savage Summoning, and when I play white, it's usually Scout's Warning. I just love the trick spells. And something like this is 100% unexpected. This is not a commonly seen card. This literally lets me flash out Bruna at the end of an opponent's turn. She doesn't even need haste at that point because she came in on their turn and I untap with her. This is just 100% one of my favorite cards in the deck. Every time I see it, it's like an eye-rolling, yeah. Through that, the deck has a whopping 2 counterspells. We have Counterspell and Render Silent. When I first brew this deck, it had a lot of awkward 1v1 stall spells. It had the Silence, it had Orm's Chant, it had Mana Short. That's where Render Silent came from. This probably should be like an Arcane Denial so I can get some draw. We have a Disenchant because it's kind of good to always have that. And then we have just spot removal, things to continually stall out the game until we actually have the mana to do something meaningful. We have a Path and a Sword, which I thought was in here. Oh, there it is. Path and Swords. We have 3 wipes in Day of Judgment, Wrath of God, Supreme Verdict, and a Cyclonic Rift. I did also have a whatever the miracle, Devastation Tide, and also a Crush of Tentacles were in this deck originally because I thought it didn't matter if the auras were in my hand. But I mean, that just wasn't giving me the room to play out enough, so those came out for more Wraths. Now, as I said, their deck, it does have some consistency to it. We have a few tutor effects. So Enlightened Tutor, this is actually more likely going to get us a mana ramp. I don't actually actively search up auras in this deck. I'm more interested in sustaining a good board presence. But Open the Armory is there just to go get an aura of some relevance. We have Intuition, which is, I don't know why this card's legal in the format. It should not be. If they were willing to ban something like Gifts Ungiven, then this should 100% not be legal. But, I mean, this literally goes and gets 3 auras. It doesn't matter what they discard or not because Bruna has access to the graveyard. This could also be finding one of 3 answers. Intuition's a complicated card, and it's really good in this deck. We have Tithe. There was a Gift of the States in here originally. But this helps me go get plains and helps me make landfalls. Again, this is just a great early turn effect. This can get non-basic plains like a shock. We have Careful Study, which is a great 1-drop. It helps me, again, I don't care about discarding cards too much in this deck. I mean, there's the Angel and the Sun Titan for recursion, and Bruna can pull the auras out of the graveyard. So a 1-drop is fantastic. Same thing, Thirst for Knowledge is an instant speed draw that I can discard. Frantic Search, same thing, instant speed draw that I can discard. Factor Fiction is here, as is Pull from Tomorrow, which again lets me discard. This is a kind of a strictish, asterisk right there, strict-ish upgrade to something like a Blue Sun's Worry Stroke. And a Sphinx's Rev is the benefit of adding white to this, since we can gain a little bit of life. And we have a Treasure Cruise, which is a nice full art paint. Let's go on to the enchantments, because, well, yeah, let's go through this now. There are 3 non-aura enchantments in the deck. Again, white in a deck that doesn't have access to green. We do want to keep our hand full and make landfalls. Land tax is fantastic for that effect. We have an Aura of Silence. This is just a really good stallish effect, another stacks effect. And of course we can use it for removal. And Sun Titan plus Aura of Silence is a very fun interaction. And finally we have True Conviction, a non-aura way of giving Bruna or any of my other threats double strike and lifelink. Now let's go through the actual auras of the deck. These are the ones I have chosen for the deck. There are 2 mind control variants. Corrupted Conscience is a common one. You'll see this in almost every iteration of a Bruna deck. And you control enchanted creature, the creature gets infect. In my playgroup, it is, depending on which one, it's almost always decided that infect and commander should be 15, not 10. So, this does not make like a double striking infected Bruna a one-hit kill in my group. Per the current rules, it is just 10 infect and EDH. But that's not how mine works. This is also just a generically fun card to dick around with early game, especially if your friends have a Ruark Thar in their deck, because then you basically just win the game. The other one is Treachery. I love pulling Treachery out early, especially with like Dreamweaver Giant, because it just gives me mana. And I don't care about, I mean, if I cast stuff early, then attack with Bruna and pull this from my graveyard, it gives me free mana to work with during combat or second main phase. We have Spirit Mantle for some protection. We have Imperial Armor. I only have this because it's a promo. This is probably not good enough for the deck. We have Battle Mastery for the double strike. We have Auramancer's Guise. Again, this is something that it's only in here, so I can toss it out some dirtily early creature. Like putting this on like, what's like the dumbest creature in the deck? Something like a Grand Abolisher and attacking for 4 vigilance. That's not really bad, but it's not super good, but I don't really care. Like that's going to bait up, eventually someone's going to remove it, and then this Aura is going to go to my graveyard, and eventually Bruna is going to pull it back. Then we have Spectral Ward. And again, this is something I cannot stack enchantments on after it is on, but Bruna's ability just pulls things. It will go onto it and nothing will fall off. We have, this is a bad enchantment. This probably, I can think of about 3 other enchantments this could be, but this is essentially a bad card draw effect. I wanted something I could like Boonweaver out early or Touch Mage out early and hopefully draw a card or 2 and be an idle threat. And putting something like this on a flying creature like the Aven Mind Sensor or something like that is 100% gonna make someone remove it. And again, I just don't care if this thing dies or not. And then of course there's Celestial Mantle for a huge life boost, just +3/+3. And the best one is the Conscription. This is the one everyone expects to be in the deck, and it's in the deck. Let's go on through the mana ramp first. Well, there's only one artifact that's not mana ramp in this deck. It is the Lightning Greaves. I mean, if Bruna's out and I can equip her and Hulk Smash before anyone can remove her with sorcery speed removal, good game. And then we have, as I said, 10 mana rocks. We have a Mana Crypt, a Soul Ring that matches the Treasure Cruise, a Wayfarer's Bauble, a Mind Stone, Thought Vessel, Azorius Signet, Talisman, a Coalition Relic, Thrawn Dynamo, and the Gilded Lotus. So that's a lot of mana rocks. That's 10 mana rocks. The same amount of mana rocks as there are enchantments and auras. What this deck really does nicely, it wants to do, is to ramp and draw and ramp and draw, wrath the board, and eventually play some creature with mana up to do something more. Let's go through the lands to finish the deck. There are 2 fetch lands. This is a budgety come to play tap, originally printed in Mirage, and then some dual deck, the Venserverse Koth, I believe. And it can get non-basics. Then we have a Russian fetch. We have the 3 fetchable non-basic lands. These are Plains Islands. And again, these are great because the plains do trigger with the Emerius Shepherd. And there's the fetch. Then we just have the normal colorful lands. As few come into play tapped lands as possible, although Colonnade is fantastic. Again, I don't care about making it a creature and chanting it, because if the enchantment falls to the graveyard, who cares? We have a command tower to match the Soul Ring and whatnot. The Temple, this is probably the first land that will cut from the deck, because tapped lands do not give me immediate access to colorful mana. Glacial Fortress, and Darkar Waste. Luckily, I've had this thing for freaking ever in a binder for like, I don't know, like 3, 4, 5 years. This was in my collection way before Eldrazi became a thing, so I'm just glad that this thing is stupidly expensive now. Nimbus Maze, which is one of my absolute favorite artworks of a card ever. Yeah, this thing's gorgeous. A Reflecting Pool, a bounce land. This is actually pretty relevant when you have a Weathered Wayfarer and a land tax in your deck. This almost makes me want to play some of the older crews, but those are just not good. But this one does help you bounce your own land. While you are susceptible to something like a Wasteland Strip Mine, you are at least back a land, so you can try to trigger land tax, for example, if you started first. Another colorful land. This is the second land that probably shouldn't be in the deck. Again, this could be just another basic land. The chance of it coming into play tapped can hurt. Cephalid Coliseum is great for Bruna, because you will very quickly have Threshold with the type of draw effects I have in here, and that's just another dig 3 deeper. Hall of the Bandit Lord is a tap land that is 100% worth being in this deck. It is the ability of giving Bruna haste. A lot of people miss the fact that you have this land. I mean, unless you're specifically saying, hey, here's my land, I'm going to cast my Bruna next turn with haste. I mean, you have to say that when you're casting this, but most people are not looking at your lands. They're looking for things like the Lightning Greaves. But then we have Winding Canyons, which is another sneaky way of getting Bruna into play on the end of an opponent's turn, so you don't have to worry about haste. Core Haven is just a generic filler. Again, this may hurt our colors a bit, since sometimes we... And it's probably worth keeping. Then we have Myriad Landscape for a last bit of fetching of all these fun basic lands. I chose to use the Shards ones, the Esper ones that have the geometric shapes in the background here. The islands are my favorite. You probably saw a collection of these in an old Dimir deck I have. But that is my current Bruna list. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, I did put a lot of research into this list. A lot of forums, a lot of Reddits. There's two different stories going on here of how you should build Bruna. I'm going to say right now, you build Bruna the way you want to build Bruna. I mean, you can literally take anyone's advice and opinion, just take your own and do what you want to do. You're not going to build it wrong, because you're building how you want to build it. But with that being said, there are two consensuses for how to build a Bruna deck. One is to have like a self-milling, graveyard-filling deck, where you either draw death yourself, or you mirror Mad Phantasm yourself, or you traumatize yourself, and then you get Bruna out and you attack for like 100. The other route is more like mine, where you have a smaller selection of enchantments and you're controlling the board. It's not obvious to everyone. One of those decks may be compatible with your own group. It may be your group's level to literally have a self-mill effect, and they may not be equipped to always answer Bruna. The more competitive your group is, the more likely they are going to be able to answer Bruna. So your self-mill thing is never going to work. I mean, think about it, just keep in mind, 6 mana. No haste, no self-protection. If your opponents can't answer that, then yeah, you can go for the self-mill fill. If your opponents can answer a 6-drop that has no self-protection, then you're going to want to have some protection of your own. You're going to want to focus on controlling the board. You want more ramp. You want more stacks effects to screw with the opponents. But again, I mean, you can just build it however you want to build it. This is my take on her. I'm going to dirtle with this a bit. She's been active for a week, 2-3 weeks now. And I like her a lot, actually. I've never actually built Azorius before. This is my first Azorius deck. And I'm actually enjoying this quite a bit. I'm sad that Bruna is gone now in the story arc. But yeah, hopefully at some point we figure out who the 4th angel is from the Avacyn era. The one that was eradicated or kicked out by Avacyn back in the original Innistrad block. I'm assuming it was a white-black legendary angel, and hopefully we get to find out who that is at some point in time. But yeah, anyways, any feedback, ideas, anything else, do let me know. I'm always open to feedback.